The most famous mitzvah, the most famous commandment in the Torah is right in the center of the Torah, chapter 19, verse 18, Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself. The rabbis tell us back then, 2,000 years ago, before there was psychology, they tell us that actually there are two commandments there, not one. It says, love your neighbor the way you love yourself, which means before you love the neighbor, you need to love yourself. The idea of self-esteem is from the Torah. Right there, it basically says if you don't like yourself, if you don't love yourself, you will not be able to love others. Which means this is one of the most crucial qualities for relationships, for marriage, for happiness, for mental health, for everything. And today, studies show us that a lot of major problems in society come from poor self-image of people, whether it's drug abuse, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's violence, crime, even child abuse, even terrorism. Think about this. Who gets involved with those despicable organizations? Do they have good self-esteem, or do they feel yucky about themselves and they have to put down somebody? And that's what psychologists are telling us. People with low self-image, they often have a need to disparage others, to put them down so they will feel a little bit higher in their own eyes. They have to feel superior. So low self-esteem can have tragic consequences even for the entire nation. One of the two worst sins in the Torah is connected to low self-esteem. The first one is the golden calf. The second one, you all remember that story. Moses sends 12 princes of Israel, each prince, each leader of each tribe, to go to the promised land to spy it out, to get research, to come back and to tell us what's going on, what should we expect there. 10 of them had poor self-image. So they come back, they panicked when they saw the local residents there, inhabitants. They come back and this is the report. And those of you who have been taking classes with me, you know, I love this line. It's an amazing line. What do they say? We looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them. If you think you're a cockroach, maybe you are a cockroach. That's basically what they're saying. They saw themselves as grasshoppers. So basically they convinced the entire community, the entire Jewish people at this point, to convince them to basically to give up hope forever entering the promised land. So people begin to weep. God is furious and he decides to punish them. And basically this is when the entire generation that got out of Egypt gets condemned to die in the desert. They will never enter the promised land. God declares, you will wander in the wilderness for 40 years. You will die here, and not one of you will enter the land which I promised, except Caleb and Joshua. Those were the two princes who said, no, Alon Aliyah, let's go, we can do it. Those two are the only ones who are going to enter from this whole generation. Imagine, ladies and gentlemen, it's about 1 week walking distance from the Red Sea to Jerusalem. It took them 40 years because of this terrible sin. But this is not it. This is not the end of the story. Our rabbis tell us that this sin took place on Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av. And so when God saw that people's fear prevented them from fulfilling their amazing destiny in the land of Israel, he decreed, today you cried for nothing. In the future, I will give you a real reason to cry. And we've been crying ever since. The holiest place on earth for the Jewish people, the Kotel, has another name. We don't like this name anymore. But still, a lot of people say, oh, I visited the Wailing Wall. And the name is obvious because of all the tears that our people spilled at that holy place. Do you realize what it means? That was Tisha B'Av. And since then, every horrible event in our history took place on that particular day. Just a few weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, we were sitting on the floor And I was sharing that we have new information now. It's not only the first temple was burnt and destroyed, the second temple, it's not only Bar Kokhba rebellion, it's not only the first crusaders, it's not only, it goes on and on and on. The first train leaves Warsaw train station to Auschwitz on Tisha B'Av. The bombing of the Jewish community in Buenos Aires in 1992, it happened on Tisha B'Av. The evil people who hated Jews, they always chose this day. Or maybe somebody is watching. Because of those 10 guys who did not feel good about themselves, look what happened, all these tragedies. And this is not over yet. The first king of Israel, King Saul, he loses his monarchy because of low self-esteem. He does something that God does not like, and Prophet Samuel says to Saul, this is such a painful line, "You may look small to yourself, but you're the head of the tribes of Israel, and God made you their king." And this is true about many of us. Many of us walk around through life, millions of people in fact, walking around thinking, listening to negative voices playing over and over in their heads. People go through life thinking, I'm not smart enough, I'm not talented enough, I will never fulfill my dreams, I'm not very attractive, I will not make it, I haven't done anything important with my life. This is very damaging, this is very harmful. Any expert will tell you this is one of the most damaging things, and it's an epidemic apparently in America. What do you think about suicide numbers of the teenagers today? Teenagers in America, in the greatest country in the world, are committing suicide. The point is that once we become convinced of something negative, it's very hard to change our mind. I read an article by a very talented psychologist who shares a very poignant story. After 20 years of marriage and ugly divorce, this woman was finally ready to begin dating. Friends pushed her a little bit and she goes online. And she meets an amazing guy, handsome, successful, you name it. The most interesting thing is that he was really like into her. So they set a date, the first date. She was nervous. She had not gone on a date over 20 years ago, so she goes and buys a new dress. She's so excited, she's nervous. So he invited her also to a famous upscale bar in Manhattan. So 15 minutes into the date, this gentleman finds an excuse and walks out. 15 minutes. She's sitting in that bar alone. She was devastated. She was so hurt, she couldn't move. So the only thing she could do was to call a friend. And this is what the friend said to her. "Well, what do you expect? You have big hips, you have nothing interesting to say. Why would a handsome, successful guy like that ever go out with you, with a loser like you?" Shocking, isn't it? What cruelty from a friend. The worst thing is, it was not her friend who said that. It's the woman saying to herself. That's what this psychologist is sharing with us. The woman convinced herself that she is a loser. And then it becomes, of course, self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is unfortunately something that all of us do. At some points in our lives, we all go down. We all feel yucky. Something is wrong. And this is what happens. We start thinking of all of our weaknesses, all our shortcomings, the mistakes we have made, what we wish we were, what we wish we were not. We even call ourselves names. Now the question is, why do we do this? Why would somebody do this? I mean, our self-esteem is already hurt. Would you do this if you had a wound physical? Would you damage it even further? I mean, would you, if you had a cut on your arm, would you say, let me go take a knife and see how deeply I can go? Of course not. And yet, when it comes to emotional wounds, psychological wounds, we do this all the time. And the question that I want to ask tonight is why? And I think one of the answers is that many of us do not know who we are. Or we knew and we forgot. The fact is that and I want to make it clear, healthy self-esteem has nothing to do with arrogance or conceit or egotism. It's not. It's based on honest, realistic self-knowledge. It must be rooted in a true and honest assessment of ourselves. Who am I really? Not what do people say about who am I? Isn't this what High Holiday is all about? This is what we're supposed to do for the next 10 days. We really have to dig honestly, open up, and say, who am I? So this is very, very important. We all have weaknesses. We all have faults. But we also have strength and accomplishments. This is what we have to find a balance. The ancient Greeks were very passionate about this. Know thyself was inscribed on the renowned temple of Apollo. Plato and Socrates constantly used that line. Know thyself. And this is what Freud was trying to accomplish with his invention, psychoanalysis. When you realize who you are, you will not go around intimidated or insecure, listening to that negative tape in your head. You will not end up settling for mediocrity. Why? Because each one of you is one of a kind. The Torah tells us that all of us were created, each one of us, were created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Think about this. When God created you, He put a part of Himself into you. You're God's child. If you want to change, to get rid of that destructive thinking and tape, you must remind yourself every day, I came from God. My Father is Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven. I have His genes. That's right. Each one of you has a DNA of Ribbono Shel Olam, Master of the universe. Imagine what you can do with that DNA. You were destined to do great things. You were meant to leave your mark in this world. Don't believe in those lies. Some people will tell you, you've reached your limits, you've gone as far as you can go, you cannot succeed. No. You're supposed to achieve your goals. Why? Because of who you are. You do not come from ordinary stock. Ladies and gentlemen, you and I belong to the chosen people. God entrusted us with a mission, unique mission. He gave us an important job to do, to make this world a better place for everybody, not for the Jews, for everybody. We are partners with the Master of the universe. What a privilege. What an honor. When you feel demoralized or defeated or depressed or just down, just go back and check your spiritual birth certificate. Remind yourself who you are. You're a child of Abraham, who argued with God. You're an ancestor of Moses, who parted the Red Sea and introduced the world to the 10 Commandments. Your relative Joseph saved the entire world from starvation. David, a shepherd boy, crushed a giant. King Solomon was the wisest person who ever lived. A young girl called Esther saved the Jewish people from genocide. Judah Maccabee defeated the mighty Greek army. And none of these people were born heroes. Their self-esteem and confidence derived from what they did, what they accomplished. It doesn't come from nothing. It's what you do. Abraham challenged God and saved Sodom and Gomorrah when God was about to destroy 2 disgusting cities. Moses confronted the Pharaoh of Egypt, the most powerful man in the world. David, interestingly enough, some of you took my class in the summer, David was not respected by his brothers nor by his father. When Samuel comes in and says, who are your boys? Who are your children? And he lines up everybody except for David. And Samuel says, do you have another one? They say, yeah, there is another one. He's a shepherd over there. They made fun of David. And David became the greatest king and poet and leader we ever had. Esther was willing to risk her life to save when the moment came. So this is, my friends, this is our family. This is your family. You came from the right family. Do not forget that you came from royalty. You have the values from the book of life. Torah is called Etz Chaim. Our Torah, our Chumash is called the book of life. You have been given the values from the book of life. Don't let the way you were raised or what somebody said to you or somebody said about you from knowing who you are. Don't dare thinking that you're average. You're not. You were not created to be mediocre. You were created to soar, to fly. You were born to overcome. You were born to leave a mark in this world. You were put on earth for greatness. Get up every morning and remind yourself who you are. If you do this, you will reach new highs. You will rise above every obstacle, and you will become everything God created you to be, because God knows who you are. Now make sure that you know who you are. L'shana tova tikatevo. We continue with the service